Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Tammy Buitendach. I'm the founder of the Sleep Company. And today we've got an interesting topic that I want to chat about. Today I want to talk about the transition from just the two of you, your marriage with just the two of you, to adding children into that lovely mix. People don't realize what an adjustment it is going from just being a family of two until adding kids to the mix. There's so many conflicts that arise. It's like when it's just the two of you, you don't really need to take anybody but one other person into consideration. And that whole phase of your relationship is discovering, how do we communicate with one another? Where is my husband's boundaries? Where are my boundaries? We're kind of ironing out how I want him to treat me, how our family dynamic works, and then you put a baby into that mix, and all of that just topples over, right? Like the best laid out communication falls apart when there's sleep-deprived mom, a sleep-deprived dad, and this new bundle of joy, which you have no idea what you're doing with, okay? And that dynamic is kind of tricky. And that's what today's conversation is going to be about, is how do we navigate that? What do we do that we find ourselves, because my husband and I had this initially, where we found ourselves enemies of one another. And the bullet was the child, and it's kind of sad, and we managed to work through that. But hopefully you can kind of have these conversations much earlier on in your parenting journey, so that you don't sit with like a mess that needs to be picked up. But let's first talk about, what is it that creates this problem in this situation, and what can we do about making it a little bit better? So firstly, once we became parents, two things kind of happen. Number one, it's like you put on this weird random hat that says, hey, I'm Mrs. Mommy and this is Mr. Daddy, and we have a job to do. And you forget who you are almost for a little bit as a human being. Now, all of a sudden, whether you intentionally or unintentionally, you start striving for a level of perfection, which is almost impossible to obtain. All of a sudden, daddy stops drinking, he stops going out, mommy stops going on girls' nights. Like, so much in your world changes because you have this person and it's yours, and you want to do absolutely everything right by this child. And it takes almost a bit of your realness. Who am I away? It's like, now I can't be the person that just flips their lid and loses their cool. Now I can't be the person that shouts and screams if that's like what I do. Like now all of a sudden I've got to completely change who I am, and I need to do that under the constraints of huge responsibility. And I'm treading in a territory that I'm exceptionally unfamiliar in. And that's really difficult. And what I found going into this is that not only did I have exceptionally high expectations of who and what I would be as a mother. I mean, we all want to be the perfect parent. But I also had exceptionally high expectations of my husband as a father. And these are not conversations we even knew we needed to have. So I came in with these expectations. He was not fulfilling half of them because they're my expectations, not his expectations, and vice versa. And it created a ton of conflict between the two of us. Also, our history and the way we were raised as a child definitely creates a window through which we look at parenting. And my window and my husband's window are very different. So the way I enter into parenthood and where he's entering into parenthood are two exceptionally different realities. And because they're not the same reality, that prism, is asking for conflict to arise. So what you want to do is you want to realize that we are a team working together, not against each other. Because my husband used to laugh at me. He used to say to me that whenever I want to take him out about something, I speak to him in the third person. I'll speak to him, I'll look at my son and I'll say, yeah, well, daddy doesn't want to bath you tonight, instead of speaking directly to my husband. It's amazing what power a little child that is really like independent on you can have on your marriage. But it took us a while to realize, and my husband was actually the one that eventually did this. He's like, listen, whatever we're doing is not working. And we need to sit down and we need to figure out what the heck it is that we want and what the heck it is that we need to do going forward. And then we got the help of a very wonderful therapist to help us guide us through this process, because it's an important process to master early on, that we are actually on the same side here. I want a child that is happy, confident, independent, who feels loved and cherished and valued and validated, and who thinks I'm the greatest mom he could ever have. And my husband wants exactly the same thing. But how I go about achieving it and how he goes about achieving it, that's where kind of the difference comes in. So here's a couple of good conversations to have when your kids are really small, or when you start seeing this kind of conflict creep in, because resentment is a terrible thing in a marriage. And it's a very subtle emotion that creeps in, that by the time the explosion or the rupture happens, you are proper in the thick of it. It's such a subtle emotion. Anger is very fast. It's very instant. And it's actually quite easy to kind of repair it when the minute he makes me angry, because I know he's just made me angry and I can deal with it. But resentment is that slow, ooh, I'm a little bit upset here, but I'm going to let it slide. Ooh, he's doing it again, but I'm going to let it slide. I'm going to let it slide. I'm going to let it slide. And then a big rupture later on. And then you've had months of resentment building up. So what you want to do is sit down and have a couple of conversations. And here are a few important ones that I suggest you have as a couple. Firstly, what is it that I expect of you as a partner and a parent? What is it that I expect? What is my dream picture of the ultimate perfect father? And then he can give me what is his, and it's not to say that you have to be that. I just want to know what is, when you picture perfect mom, what does that look like to you? And then I'll say, well, what does the perfect dad look like to me? And then we can have a discussion about how much of that is reasonable and how much of that is irrational. Then also you want to speak about each individual childhood. What is it in your childhood that you remember exceptionally fondly? Because those are beautiful values and activities and stuff to bring into your own family. My husband's family, they used to do pizza night on a Friday night. And he vividly remembered, like, pizza and movie night. That's a beautiful thing. For us, Christmas was a huge celebration, and I have such amazing memories of the excitement and everything that went into Christmas. And now we're like, okay, cool, these are all cool things. Let's add this and create our own family picture. Also, what is it in your childhood that really harmed and hurt you? That's also important to kind of understand, because for me, I was never taken into consideration. Because mommy said so, that's why. That was the answer I got for everything. She didn't care that I had a need to go to some party because my best friend would be, or whatever. She didn't care. Mommy, I say no, that's that. And I really would have liked, more of your opinion and your needs matter. So that was important for me. For my husband, he came from a family where there was a lot of silent treatment. And a lot of love was withdrawn from him when he was small and misbehaved. So for him, that message that nothing you do will make me withdraw my love. My love is literally unconditional. That was really important to him. And both of those are beautiful things to think about and to expand upon in your own parenting and marital journey. Another great question to ask is, how do we want to raise these kids? What value systems are exceptionally important to us? My husband is Afrikaans and I was raised English, and those cultures are quite different. And there were some things in the Afrikaans culture that were valuable to him, and there's some things in the English culture valuable to me, and some that we created a new kind of value system in our own home. So that's a good conversation to have. Another one is, how are we going to go about disciplining our children? For me, I grew up in a very authoritarian parent family system, and that really hurt me a lot. So much so that I spent a huge chunk of my adult life dealing from that authoritarian parenting. My husband had authoritarian parenting as well. And it's okay. When I went into parenting with my firstborn, I was just like, my goal was just, I want to be anything that my mom wasn't. So if my mom did it this way, I swung the pendulum all the way this way. And that's not great either, right? Because everything my mom did was not wrong. So my husband actually sat me down and was like, okay, I get it. What your mom did wasn't great. But I feel like what we're currently doing, having no structure and becoming exceptionally permissive parents, that's not good either. We need a plan. And it was through that conversation that we were like, okay, what are we going to do? And that's where my parenting course came in, because I went and did the Thomas Gordon's parent effectiveness training. I found a course, my husband and I attended it, and I went and did the instructor training on that, because it was like we needed to find what type of parenting style resonated with us. And that one really resonated with us because it's on neither side of the spectrum. It's very inclusive of the child and your needs and the child needs. It's a very respectful form of parenting. And we went then into it and we tried to figure out, okay, we don't want to be disciplined the way we were, but let's find a healthy new way that we'll embark on disciplining our own children. Also, what about schools? Is school something, are you both in agreement on the type of school you want to send your child to? Does one want to go private, one want to go government? Like, what's your plan as far as schooling goes? Because some conflict can arise here. I knew I didn't want to put my kids in a mainstream schooling system. I was bullied a lot, not by my peers, but by my teachers. And the whole workload and weight that I feel is placed on children at a young age in that schooling system doesn't ring true to me. This is my value now. It doesn't have to be yours. And I was just like, I don't want to do this, but I also don't want to homeschool because I need a break from my kids. I have no intention of being my child's teacher. And he was like, well, look around. Tell me what other options there are, and I'm open to hearing you out. And I found the Waldorf schooling system, and he was in agreement, and we placed our kids in that school. And then finally, you want to have discussions, especially if your kids are already born and they're young. How do the kids trigger me? Because they trigger you in very specific ways. And the way the child triggers you is very much linked to a hurt or an unresolved childhood issue from your childhood. My youngest, my second born, is exceptionally feisty, and she has big emotions. And I grew up in a household where negative emotions were unacceptable. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to see about it. Shut it down immediately. And I am still learning about emotional regulation, and that all the emotions I feel are actually okay. How I act them out is acceptable or unacceptable, but the fact that I feel frustrated doesn't make me a bad mom. It makes me a human being that is normal and real. So now my daughter comes in and she has these big emotions. I'm already struggling to deal with my own, and then she brings hers on top of mine, and it's a recipe for disaster. So her big emotional outbursts really trigger me. My son's temperament, who's older, he's very, I wouldn't say compliant, but he's very easygoing. He is very neutral, and it's easier because he doesn't trigger me as much. But he's very emotional in the sense that he's soft and he gets sad very easy. He's a little bit melancholic. And that triggers my husband, because my husband has this idea that you must be strong, you must stand up for yourself, you mustn't be weak, because he was bullied by friends at school. So all these kind of triggers feed into the dynamic, and often it helps if your partner and you actually understand what triggers you and why. Because it opens up a conversation. Yes, you really lose it every time Ella Grace does this. I wonder why that is. And we can have a conversation. And what that does is it brings that information into your awareness. So I always say, if there's one thing you want to be, don't be an unintentional parent. Don't wing it. You only get to do this once. You can repeat jobs and relationships many times in your life. You get a do-over. If you have a try relationship and you mess it up completely, guess what? There'll be another relationship that you can practice on. If you do bad at this job, that's fine. You can find another job and you can maybe be better at that job. But with parenting, you only got this one chance to do it right. So you want to make sure you don't unintentionally walk into parenting. Don't walk in without a plan. You can't control every aspect of it. Of course you can't, but you want to have things where you know you're weak in, or like the whole discipline thing with me and my husband. We went and found a course that we could attend to teach us a better way of doing it. So we were intentional about how it was we wanted to raise our kids. then also remember that when your kids are small, they are exhausting. They are really exhausting, and there's nothing that you can do about this, okay? They're exceptionally exhausting. They are so dependent on you, and that can be exceptionally draining. And I'll never forget the one day I'm in the kitchen and my son is next to me. He's like 4 years old, and he's like, Mommy, I want a juice. Mommy, I want a juice. I'm holding the baby. She had colic. She's screaming blue freaking murder, and I'm trying to bounce her. And then my husband walks in, freshly showered from the bathroom, and he's like, have you made dinner yet? And I just wanted to throw the baby at him, and I wanted to storm out of that house. And shortly thereafter, we were having like a bit of a fight about it, where I'm like, you need to help me out, and I'm doing everything, and what's the freaking point? And I had a real proper adult temper tantrum. And he said to me, well, you didn't even ask me how my day is going anymore. You don't care about what's going on in my life, and da-da-da-da-da. And eventually, once the dust had settled, we sat down and we had a conversation, and we spoke heart to heart. And he's like, listen. And I'm like, listen, it's not that I don't care about what happens in your day anymore. It's just that at this moment in time, in our parenting journey, when our kids are small, my plate is full. I am so touched out at the end of the day, overwhelmed at the end of the day. I've tried to diffuse, I don't know how many tantrums. I just don't have it in me to even care about how your day went. And that's not a selfishness, and I know it's important to you, but it's just the reality. It is honestly the reality. And if I sit you down and I pretend my mind is going to run off to 1,000 other places, because at this moment in time, I'm running 3 schedules in my mind. And then you're going to pick that up, and it's going to be a mess, right? You're going to know I'm not actually caring about what you're talking about. And he said, you know what? These young kids, they're going to be exhausting on us. But I think if we both just realize that this is just a phase, it's a difficult phase. It's got definitely a lot of perks, okay? And don't get me wrong, it's adorable having little children, but it's exhausting on us, and it is stealing from our marriage, whether you want to admit it or not. It steals time for your marriage, because you can't just leave them and go on a date. You have to organize babysitters, and we were like, if we just realize that this is just a phase, and we don't hold it against each other, but we work as a team to almost support each other, soon this phase is going to be over, and our marriage will reach a next phase where we have more time, and we can then reconnect. And I'm not saying don't connect. You've got to make time for your marriage, because you won't have a marriage after young children if you're not intentional about making time for each other. But we just wanted to realize that I get it. I get it that it's hard. It's hard for you. It's hard for me. And let's just survive this, because if we can survive this, we'll come out the other side okay. So help each other out, have these conversations when they need to happen. Do it in an environment where it's not tit for tat. Don't create an argument about it, but open up a dialogue, open up a conversation, because that's going to be so valuable to your parenting journey and your marriage going forward. I hope that this was helpful. Bye.